Let me tell you something about ego. Ego convinces people they'll always have another chance, that you'll always be there. That walking away from someone who gave them their heart won't cost them anything, so he let you go. He didn't fight for you. He thought keeping his pride intact was more important than keeping someone who actually cared. But ego doesn't protect you from loss, it causes it, and now he's realizing the thing he was too proud to hold on to is the one thing he can't get back. That's not revenge, that's karma, and you didn't have to do a thing. He believed that holding back, staying emotionally unavailable, and keeping you at a distance somehow made him more powerful. He thought if he showed less interest, you'd chase more. If he kept you guessing, you'd value him more. That's the illusion ego creates, it says. Don't get too close, don't be too vulnerable, don't try too hard, because to the ego, effort looks like weakness. But the truth is, ego doesn't make you attractive. It makes you replaceable. In the beginning, you were willing. You brought your energy, your openness, your effort. You showed up with sincerity, ready to build something real. But he mistook that for guaranteed presence. He saw your loyalty as something permanent, something he didn't need to earn every day. So he got comfortable, and once someone believes you'll never leave, they stop doing what it takes to make you stay. His ego convinced him that being emotionally distant would make you want him more. It convinced him that acting like he didn't care would keep you hooked. But there's a breaking point in every emotionally intelligent person, a moment when the silence stops pulling you in and starts pushing you out. And the second you stopped chasing, he lost his power. The truth is, real confidence doesn't need to play games. It doesn't rely on manipulation or mixed signals. It shows up, it communicates, it's consistent. Ego, on the other hand, is fragile. It needs to be in control. It hides behind pride because it's terrified of rejection, and when you see that clearly, everything changes. Because once you realize he wasn't distant because he was strong, but because he was scared, he doesn't seem so magnetic anymore. He thought he could keep his edge by not trying, but love doesn't respond to arrogance. Love responds to connection, vulnerability, and presence. What he didn't realize is that every time he pulled back, you stopped trusting the space. Every time he held back affection, you stopped feeling safe. And eventually, all those little moments add up and you stop waiting for more. He believed withholding effort made him the prize. That's the irony when ego is in charge. People think they're elevating themselves by doing less, but in reality, they're teaching you exactly how little they're willing to invest. And you listened, you paid attention, you realized that being with someone who thinks effort is optional is not love, it's emotional labor. When you finally walked away, he may have felt confused, maybe even shocked, because people who lead with ego are often blind to their own behavior. He didn't see the subtle ways he was pushing you out. He didn't notice the disappointment building up each time he didn't show up for you. And now that you're gone, he's sitting with the space he created because that's what ego does. It pushes away the very thing it wants, just to avoid being vulnerable enough to admit it. The moment you chose your peace over proving your worth, the game ended, and not because you were trying to teach him a lesson, but because you simply outgrew the dynamic. He wanted to be chased, but you were done running. He wanted to feel desired, but not at the cost of your dignity. He wanted to stay on a pedestal, but you no longer looked up. You looked within. That's what makes you powerful. Not because you played colder or cared less, but because you knew your value didn't need to be earned through someone else's validation. His ego created the distance, his ego built the wall, but the regret that comes when he realizes that all along he wasn't protecting his heart, he was pushing away the one person who truly saw it. You showed up for him fully, authentically. You gave him the kind of love that was real, patient, forgiving, invested. You didn't come in playing games or trying to manipulate him into staying. You just cared deeply and genuinely. And when things felt off, when the energy shifted or he pulled away, You didn't respond with revenge or coldness, you responded with communication. You asked questions, you tried to understand, you extended grace, you gave him space to be honest, space to step up. But he didn't. Instead of meeting your effort with honesty, he met it with ego. He responded with silence, with avoidance, with just enough attention to keep you close, but never enough to make you feel secure. You weren't met with clarity, you were met with confusion, and when you brought up how you felt, how you needed more, how you were hurting, he made you feel like you were asking for too much. He minimized it, dodged it, maybe even turned it back on you. That's what games do. They twist love into power struggles. And what he didn't realize was that you weren't there to compete. You were there to connect. You didn't love him to control him. You didn't communicate to win. You just wanted to build something real. But ego doesn't understand that kind of vulnerability. It sees love as something to protect itself from, not something to lean into. So instead of appreciating your openness, he saw it as weakness. He saw your effort as overinvestment. He thought your patience meant he could continue without growing. That's where things quietly began to end, because it's not always one big moment that breaks things. It's the slow realization that your emotional labor is going unnoticed, that your love is being treated like an option, that your presence is being assumed. And when that happens, something inside of you begins to close. Not with bitterness, but with exhaustion. You start to withdraw, not to punish him, but to preserve yourself. He may not have realized it at the time, but when he chose ego over honesty, he chose distance over depth. And what he was too proud to give consistency, openness, reassurance, was exactly what you needed to stay. But you weren't going to beg for it. You weren't going to keep explaining what real love looks like to someone who only saw it as a threat to his control. The truth is, you were never hard to love. You were just trying to love someone who wasn't ready to give up their ego for something deeper. You kept showing up in the hope that one day he would too, but love is a two-person job, and no matter how much heart you bring, you can't carry the connection alone. Eventually, the moment comes when you stop talking and start listening to your own intuition. You stop making excuses for his distance. You stop overanalyzing the mixed signals. You stop waiting for him to grow into someone you can build with. And when that happens, you start letting go not just of the person, but of the illusion that if you just tried harder, things would be different. He thought you'd always be there because that's what ego assumes. That love will wait forever, but love doesn't wait forever. And when someone uses your love to play games, to avoid accountability, or to feed their ego, they don't lose you suddenly. They lose you gradually. And by the time they realize what they had, you've already outgrown the version of yourself that would have stayed. That's the cost of ego and the beginning of regret. He thought walking away made him strong. That letting go of you was a show of control, of confidence, of I don't need anyone. But letting go of someone who truly loved you, not because you were toxic or unhealthy, but because you asked for more than ego was willing to give, that's not strength. That's fear in disguise, because real strength isn't about who can care less. It's about who can show up, communicate, and face the discomfort of growth. And he couldn't. You weren't asking for the world. You were asking for effort, for presence, for partnership. You were asking for consistency, not perfection. But even that made him uncomfortable, because meeting those needs would have required him to be vulnerable, to step outside his comfort zone, to drop the act and be real. Instead of leaning in, he leaned out. Instead of rising to meet you, he retreated into pride. That's the thing about ego. It would rather sabotage something beautiful than admit it's scared to open up. He told himself he didn't need you, that you were too much, too emotional, or too intense. But the truth is, you were simply too honest for his ego to handle. You brought depth and he wasn't ready to go there, and so he let you go, not with grace but with avoidance. And he thought that made him powerful, What he didn't understand in that moment is that letting go of someone who was rooting for you is not a flex. Pushing away the person who had your back isn't independent, it's self-sabotage, and in the beginning he probably didn't feel the consequences. He may have felt lighter, freer, more in control. That's what ego gives you, a short-term sense of safety. But that safety is built on denial. Time passes, the silence grows, the messages stop. You stop reaching out, stop checking in, stop trying to bridge the distance he created. And that's when the regret begins to surface, not because he suddenly grew, but because he finally felt your absence. That's the irony of ego. It doesn't appreciate what it has until it can no longer feed off of it, until it's gone. At first, he thought his detachment was strength. But real strength would have meant being brave enough to say, "I care." Real strength would have meant leaning into the hard conversations instead of shutting down. But he chose the easier path, walking away instead of growing up. And the price of that decision doesn't come immediately. It comes quietly, through late-night thoughts, through empty texts he doesn't send, through watching you glow up without him. And now he sits with a truth that's hard to swallow, that the person he let go of in pride was the one person who truly saw him. That the connection he walked away from wasn't holding him back, it was inviting him to evolve, and instead of rising to meet it, he ran. Not because you weren't enough, but because being loved that deeply required more of him than he was ready to give. The regret hits when he realizes that what he thought was confidence was actually fear, that what he saw as strength was avoidance, and that the version of you who would have waited, who would have kept trying, who would have forgiven again and again, she's gone. Not because she stopped loving, but because she started respecting herself more than the situation. He let you go to protect his ego, but now he has to live with what that ego cost him. And no amount of missing you, regretting it, or replaying memories can bring back the moment where he could have chosen love over pride. Because now that moment has passed, and the silence he once used as power is the same silence that now keeps him awake. Karma isn't about punishment. It's not about getting even, being cold, or hoping someone suffers because they hurt you. Karma is much quieter than that. It doesn't shout, it doesn't rush, it waits, and then one day it shows someone exactly what they gave. Not through revenge, but through reflection, through the way life holds up a mirror and says, This is what you offered someone who only ever gave you love. When he let his ego run the relationship, when he kept you at arm's length, when he downplayed what you meant, he wasn't thinking about the long term. He was thinking in the moment about control, about comfort, about not having to show vulnerability. He didn't think he'd lose you, he thought you'd always be there, that he could give the bare minimum and you'd keep showing up with open hands and an open heart. And when you finally stopped giving, stopped reaching, stopped waiting, he noticed. But by then, karma had already stepped in. Because karma doesn't always look like someone else hurting. Sometimes it looks like someone finally sitting with the weight of their choices. Sitting in silence, wondering why their phone doesn't light up with your name anymore. Wondering how they went from being the center of your world to not even being a thought in your day. That's karma. It's the slow burn of regret. The quiet realization that the attention they used to take for granted now belongs to someone else, or better yet, to you. You're giving it to yourself now. You're not focused on revenge. You're focused on rebuilding, on becoming, on healing, and that shift, that's the part they feel. They may act like they're fine. They may post, pretend, or even flirt with someone new. But deep down, when their world gets quiet, they feel it. The absence, the difference, the way no one matches your energy. The way no one challenges them to be better the way you did, or makes them feel seen the way you did. That's when the reflection kicks in. That's when karma speaks, because karma isn't about someone else hurting. It's about the natural consequences of misalignment. When someone chooses ego over connection, distance over growth, silence over vulnerability. They create their own outcome. You didn't have to manipulate that. You didn't have to force anything. You just had to let go, and in doing that, life took care of the rest. You became the lesson, not because you wanted to, but because you had to. Because no matter how much love you had for him, you couldn't keep shrinking yourself just to fit into a space that didn't honor you. You couldn't keep teaching someone how to love you when they weren't ready to learn, and the moment you stopped trying is the moment karma began her quiet work. Now he has to live with the space where you used to be. He has to carry the realization that you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. And when he finally understands what he lost, it won't be because you rubbed it in his face. It'll be because life put him in situations that made him feel what you felt: ignored, overlooked, undervalued. That's the mirror. That's how karma works. It gives people the same energy they gave out, just in a different form. Not to punish, but to teach. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away, keep your heart soft, and let life show them what they couldn't see when you were right in front of them. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect, because karma isn't yours to give, but growth, that is, and you chose that instead. At first, everything looked easy for him. He thought he had the world at his fingertips, that you would always be there waiting, forgiving, loving. He believed the connection between you was unbreakable, that no matter how little effort he put in, you'd never walk away. But desire isn't something you can take for granted. It's a delicate thing that needs care, attention, and respect to grow. And what he didn't realize was that the moment he stopped showing up fully, the fantasy he had of you began to fade. When we're in love, especially early on, everything feels magical. We see the best in the other person. We overlook flaws, make excuses, and hold onto hope. He thought he could keep you on a string, that his ego would make him more desirable. He thought that by acting distant, he would spark your chase, but what he didn't see is that desire doesn't come from feeling like you have to prove yourself constantly or beg for attention. Desire comes when someone feels safe, valued, and seen. As time went on, you started to notice the cracks. The times he didn't call back. The way his words didn't match his actions. The way his ego put walls between you instead of bridges. That fantasy, the image he had of you as someone who would wait forever, who would always be available, started to crumble. And when that fantasy fades, what's left isn't the person you were, but the reality of what the relationship actually was. Regret doesn't hit when everything is perfect. It hits when the illusion disappears and the truth reveals itself. He saw you not as a partner, but as a given, someone who didn't require the work or respect that real love demands. And that's when regret starts to creep in. Because once he realizes that no one else brings your energy, your kindness, your loyalty, once he realizes he can't replace what he lost, that's when it becomes painful. He thought he was free, but he was trapped by his ego and by the choices he made. He's caught between what he wanted to believe and what really happened. And in that space, regret grows. It grows because he understands, perhaps too late, that desire isn't about control or distance. It's about connection. It's about showing up and making someone feel important every day. The funny thing about regret is that it doesn't always lead to change. Sometimes it just leads to longing. Longing for what could have been. Longing for the person who didn't give up. Longing for the love he lost because he wasn't willing to be vulnerable enough to keep it alive. That's the true cost of ego. It blinds you to what matters until it's gone. And the worst part is, by the time he feels that regret fully, you've moved on, not just from him, but from the version of yourself that stayed stuck in the hope that he would come around. You've grown, you've healed, and you've raised your standards. You no longer wait for someone to realize your worth because you realize it yourself. And that is the real loss for him, the realization that the person he let go has become someone he can't reach anymore. Desire isn't about chasing or playing games. It's about mutual respect, consistent effort, and emotional availability. When those things aren't there, no amount of ego or pride can fill the void. The regret he carries isn't just about losing you. It's about losing the chance to build something real, something lasting, something meaningful. And that's a lesson he's going to have to live with long after you've stopped caring. In the end, regret is the shadow left behind when desire fades. And when desire fades because of ego and neglect, it's not just him who pays the price. It's the possibility of what you both could have had if only he had chosen differently. The real karma in this whole story isn't just about what happens to him, it's about what happens to you. Because while he was busy feeding his ego, taking you for granted and pushing you away, you were doing something much more powerful. You were growing. You were healing. You were choosing yourself, your worth, and your peace over someone who couldn't see your value. That's the kind of karma that doesn't come in the form of payback or revenge. It comes as transformation. When someone treats you like an option, it can feel devastating. It can leave you questioning everything about yourself, your worth, and what you deserve. But what separates those who stay stuck from those who rise above is the choice to stop allowing someone else's ego to define their self-worth. You made that choice. You stopped shrinking to fit his limited view of you. You stopped begging for scraps of attention and affection. Instead, you stepped into your power and showed up for yourself in ways he never could. That growth is the real karma. Because it's undeniable, it's visible, and it's unshakable. It's the way you walk into a room now, with confidence, with clarity, with self-respect. It's the way you speak about yourself, no longer doubting your value or apologizing for your needs. It's the way you no longer tolerate being treated as less than what you deserve. That shift is profound. It's magnetic, and it's something he will see every time he thinks about what he lost. When he looks back, he'll remember not just the love you gave, but the woman you became. The woman who refused to settle for less. The woman who recognized her worth and walked away with her head held high. That's a kind of karma that's more powerful than any argument or ultimatum. It's quiet, but it screams volumes. It's the living proof that he didn't just lose a person. He lost someone who grew beyond his reach. And that loss isn't just about what he no longer has. It's about what he will never get back. The chance to be part of your growth, to witness your transformation, to be loved by someone who fully understands the value of mutual respect and emotional availability. Instead, he's left with the regret of seeing you thrive without him, the sting of knowing that his ego pushed away something truly rare. Your growth also sends a clear message to the universe. You won't be disrespected or overlooked. You won't stay in situations that don't honor you. And you won't waste your time on people who can't see your worth. That energy, that boundary, is a form of karma because it sets the tone for everything that follows in your life. It attracts respect, healthy relationships, and people who match your level of self, love, and commitment. Meanwhile, his regret isn't just an emotion. It's a reflection of the energy he put out into the world. The ego that once made him feel invincible now makes him vulnerable to loss. The pride that kept him from showing up fully now makes him watch you from a distance, wishing he had the courage to do things differently. That's the paradox of ego. It promises strength, but often delivers isolation. But here's the truth. You don't need to carry his regret or fix his mistakes. Your growth is yours. It's your power, it's your freedom. And it's the greatest kind of karma there is because it proves that no matter how someone else treats you, you have the ability to rise above and create a life filled with love, respect, and joy. So while he's left with regret, you're left with growth, and that difference, That's everything. At the end of the day, what he lost wasn't just a person. He lost the chance to be loved fully, to grow alongside someone who truly valued him. His ego pushed away what he couldn't control, and karma quietly stepped in to remind him of what really matters. But you walked away stronger, wiser, and more in tune with your worth. You didn't need to teach him a lesson. Life did that for you. Your power lies not in holding on or chasing, but in knowing when to let go and choosing yourself above all else. Remember, the greatest victory isn't in making someone regret losing you, it's in becoming the kind of person no one would ever want to lose.